Hey everyone, academic tyranny is not only a reality, but it's happening and being propagated throughout the Western world. And we're definitely seeing it today in Canada. Jordan Peterson, Gad Saad, and Lindsay Shepherd are three of the most recent examples of that reality. And you can bet your bottom line that there's a whole lot more people in this country that are suffering as a consequence of the ramp up in rhetoric and propaganda being espoused by those who are supposed to be your educators or your thought leaders. And this article submitted to medium.com by Alaric Nouad is just further confirmation of that. It's being reported on May 1st, 2019. The academic inquisition. Suffer not the heretic scholar to live. It has been said that the pen is mightier than the sword, and indeed, for the sword may end a life, but the pen, through its propaganda power, has spread ideologies that have exterminated millions over the 20th and 21st centuries. Long in our history has there been a desire by certain groups, fueled by their own sense of infallibility, to dominate those deemed to be morally inferior souls. Alas, for the greatest foe to this totalitarian barbarism is wisdom born from knowledge. Yet not knowledge as harbored by those of self-righteous worth, but knowledge which devours untruth by its sureness and its factual illumination. This is the knowledge that is so despised, for like a mirror, it holds a clear reflection of what one really is. Whether beneficent or evil, they cannot bear to look upon their own faces. Axioms in time and space cannot be overturned with arguments based on emotions or feelings, and hence the scholar who would indulge in these is sure to become a target for those of ill will. Those who have enslaved their mind in cult of ideology walk around blindly but loudly preach their own clear vision. To them, axioms of universal truth are heretical, a smirch on the name of their mindless ideological fervor. Like in the days of old, their rallying cry is merely to destroy by force, and their hoarse calls are only to burn the unbeliever. In reality, what more can they do? Their claims cannot be proven, and they are shown to be whisperers of empty mist rather than the sages of knowledge they think themselves to be. Some who have original thoughts and some who, like Galileo, may seem like true heretics in their rejection of the established radical ideology cult of academic doctrine. There have been calls by the faux scholars, those in fields that cannot rightfully be called subjects, nor schools, but rather echo chambers of ideological offal, and the dross of true academia to wage a war, nay, a crusade on all who dare to think freely. This self-appointed and intellectually deficient academic inquisition would dictate by its own terms that which is sanctioned and that which is not. Not unlike the judges of the Salem witch trials they have deemed guilty, without evidence or forethought, all those who would dare partake in the hearsay of free thought. Ironically, their techniques are not new and are not particularly surprising, as they have been used by dictatorships and the worst of human rights abusers in history. On May 10, 1933, the Nazi Party had a grand bonfire called the Burning of the Books, where all ideas contrary to the diseased Nazi ideology were offered to the sacrificial flames of the Nazi cult. It was not long before they started burning people too. Infected by the plague of radical ideology, student groups regularly protested and rallied against professors not deemed to uphold the Nazi ideology in order to force them out of office. Universities were annexed by the government, and academics were scrutinized and blacklists were made. Professors who refused to stand behind the dictated racially pure science were turned upon by the then existing academic inquisition and were rewarded with indefinite stays at their local death camp. It was the end of open discourse because nothing that could hurt Nazi feelings were permitted to be discussed. The end of free speech meant the end of academia, and about 15% of academics who would not submit to this demonic evil were purged. Does one not see a parallel today? The Soviet Union spurred the rabid dogma of Lenin and Stalin, eradicated any free thinker who dared to even the slightest disagreement to their radical ideologies. During the Great Purge, intelligentsia were tightly monitored, and the lists of the dead, great minds and vast intellects can easily be found. Name upon name upon name, murdered for refusing to bow to the ideological cult. Need one continue, Are the millions of corpses in the USSR and Nazi Germany not sufficient proof that the worst of ideologies are the ones that want freedom of speech curtailed so that they may indulge themselves in mindless slaughter for their own envisioned greater good? Shall we mention the Khmer Rouge, who executed almost every intellectual in the country? No intellectuals meant that no one could offend the feelings of the Khmer Rouge. How very convenient. The Khmer Rouge was so enthusiastic in eliminating anything potentially offensive that they literally ran out of graves and soil with which to cover their victims. In Cuba, intelligentsia were either quick to flee or else executed or imprisoned. The examples here are by no means exhaustive. There is an undeniable and irrefutable historical pattern where academics are among the first primary targets of totalitarian ideological dictatorships. Blacklisting can only be described as academic terrorism by the Academic Inquisition in their academic right-speak crusade. It is cowardice and admission that one does not possess the mental fortitude with which to counter the viewpoints of others. It is infantile and petty by its very nature. Contrary to the effect desired by the Academic Inquisition, there are more and more professors who refuse to kowtow to this and are in fact more willing to publish with their thoughts after the call to blacklist those who do so. Ironically, various experts in their fields, with many authors being in disagreement with each other, find this to be a point of agreement. The difference, however, is in the openness to discuss these differences of opinions in dialogue. Individual academics have been hounded by this academic inquisition. Consider only a few. Professor Jordan Peterson was called a bigot for refusing to follow the totalitarian legislation that sought to impose compelled speech on the population. Professor Gad Saad, an Arab Jew who narrowly escaped the murders of Jews during the Lebanese War, and yet he is called a Nazi, which is really a very distasteful thing to call a Jew and a refugee, and bigot because he dares to use his brain and speak out against the current foolishness. Professor Janice Fiamengo, a woman who left feminism after realizing it is not all that it was cracked up to be. In many senses, she is one of the ultimate heretics because she was once part of the ideology that now wishes to silence all dissenters. Professor Dennis Gauss faces continued harassment from feminist faculty and radical ideologues for daring to state that not all problems are related to the mythical patriarchy. Dr. Deborah So, a researcher extraordinaire who has been critical of many of the ideological motivations that run contrary to biological science in regard to gender and sex. The so-called intellectual dark web is really a misnomer because it allows freedom of expression and interchange of academic concepts between individuals who are often in strong disagreement with each other, much like the heterodox academy. My sincere advice to any academic who disagrees with another is this: form a logical argument and present one's views as to why any particular academic is incorrect. Do not stoop to petty ad hominem attacks. Do not act like a cognitively underdeveloped intellectual infant who throws a tantrum every time someone dares to oppose the views of their ideological echo chamber. Adults are able to have serious conversations because they are mature. How much more so should academics? Alaric Nouad, professor of linguistics, scholar, social scientist, a member of the Heterodox Academy, and nerd extraordinaire. I applaud this individual for submitting such a great article. So if you're one of those people that are considering entering into these academic institutions in Canada as a student or a teacher, or if you're a parent who has a child or children that are going to enter into these post-secondary educations or institutions, the onus is on you to properly inform yourself so that you can be prepared for the onslaught of ideologically driven stances and narratives and the propaganda that's going to be thrust upon your sons or daughters, because without you having the ability to know what's actually going on, then you might not be in a very good position to help them out. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.